Hey everyone, welcome to this podcast called Ken Reads, where I, Ken, read out your letter that you've shared with me in the hopes that I can better help you understand what the F just happened between you and the last partner you were dating, whether it was in a relationship or a situationship. I look at these experiences from the lens of attachment theory. I don't just come up with thought terminating cliches like, they're just not that into you, or if they wanted to, they would. While some of those phrases might have their benefit in other dynamics, I try and look at this from the lens of, is there perhaps an insecure attachment issue that's at play in these particular dynamics? And though I am an Australian counsellor, I am not someone who is going to be responding to these letters as if I was with a client. I'm here to provide validation, yes, but I can't provide any diagnoses on these. So even if, a lot of people might understandably hear this and be like, well, that sounds like a narcissist. At best, I'll probably say, sounds a bit narky. I probably won't go any further than that out of respect to my ethical boundaries in regards to what I can and can't do. If you find this of benefit to you, fantastic. That's what I want. And if you want to submit your letter, you're very welcome to, once there is obviously availability per month. And I'll happily read out and share my own 2 cents as to what I think has gone on in your dating experience to offer you a sense of validation for what you've been through, and also to give other people listening a chance to feel like maybe this relates to what they've also experienced as part of collective healing. So with that all out of the way, let's dive in to the latest letter. Our next letter comes from a gentleman who I'm going to call David. David writes, I was involved in a 7-year relationship, in a same-sex relationship with my partner, Jay. He ended this relationship recently and gave 3 reasons which were relatively superficial. As an example, he was moving in Manhattan, and despite having movers, he was angry that I didn't use my car and help him. As an aside, he never asked for help. We've had a relationship filled with ups and downs. Despite there being intense chemistry and many amazing times, Jay never allowed me to be in his life despite demanding my full attention and devotion and monogamy. In fact, in 7 years, I've never met a single person in his life, and he's never acknowledged my existence. There was nothing on social media that linked us, and in general, he shied away from things like busy gay bars and events that would show we're a team. It's important to note that we have a 20-year age gap, but he is well into his 30s and I'm into my 50s. Now, this is not uncommon in the gay community, as there are many intergenerational couples in New York. He socialized with older gay men, so it was very confusing, as I'm a nice-looking, successful Wall Street banker. I want to take a pause here. So, David, yes, you're absolutely right. And for those of you who are listening, you may have heard that I've talked many times about what I would describe as intergenerational age gap relationships. So it's not something that's exclusive to our community in the LGBTQI plus space. So just thought I'd throw it out there and say it does happen. But it's relevant information, and I'm glad, David, you've shared this as well too, because I could understand maybe there being speculation of, oh, is there shame about the age gap? Is it weird that it's like dating someone who's particularly old? Is it strange that we look a particular way? And my answer is no. Usually when it comes to fear of intimacy, those will not be the reasons subconsciously for a breakup. They may be what I call the superficial reasons, if that comes up at all. But I think I'd say this information is good to know within reason, but I suspect if this is an avoidant breakup, fear of intimacy won't be, because there's such a significant age gap. Anyways, let's continue. I'd always had some concerns, as I would suddenly see him following a man my age on Instagram who lived far away, but was often in New York and posting pictures near his apartment. When I asked about them, I never got a satisfactory answer. Okay, so we can see here that obviously Jay is seemingly into men who are older than him. He at least, posts messages and also demonstrates interest on social media. So like I said, I don't think this is going to be a case that the age is the relevant factor for why this didn't work out. Right after we met, around 1 year after, I had him meet with a friend, an old colleague who was in an open intergenerational marriage, to get some comfort around this, hoping it would make him more comfortable. 2 years ago, I found out he seduced my friend and they had sex and both said nothing, as Jay indicated we had an open relationship. Okay, this is something I'm going to take a pause on. Firstly, I am so sorry to hear that that happened, David, because I'm guessing the impression is that this was not something that, whoop, earthquake. This was not something that you were anticipating because it sounds like Jay had emphatically said he wants a monogamous relationship with you. And then all of a sudden, he's making up excuses saying that you're in an open relationship, which is complete bullshit. And I think what really bothers me about this is the fact that it doesn't seem like you were involved in this decision making at all. In particularly, I'd say gay and lesbian spaces, open relationships are a very dicey, dicey relational experience for a lot of us because how do I put it? For those of you who aren't part of our community, the problem is that our community has been associated with free love, ethical non-monogamy, and having non-monogamous experiences, right? And on one hand, I think it's wonderful that our community has embraced trying alternative forms of relationships to see if they work. And for those that can make it work, fantastic. However, in my experience as a gay man who's seen a lot of these style of relationships play out, often I find they're born from a lot of trauma and they're not done with the best of intentions. In fact, I see a lot of particularly very strongly avoidant people try and pull the let's do an open relationship as a bit of a let's, just not be monogamous together and to excuse their shitty behavior. So it's quite common for open relationships to be used really quite offensively against their partners. And if their partner's not particularly secure, they may acquiesce and be like, okay, sure. And it really ends up hurting them. Now, this kind of behavior can happen in straight pairings as well, too. I've heard of these sort of stories happening there. But I'd argue it's more prevalent in gay and lesbian circles because of how it's often associated as a community with being acceptable to be in open relationships. I myself have nothing against open relationships if done for the right reasons, but I often find these relationships in the gay community and lesbian spaces are done in ways that are used to justify fear of intimacy and not done ethically at all. And they go against the sanctity of that particular relationship. So just thought I'd throw that bit of trivia because it's important to think about within the context of what's going on in this story. 6 months ago, I was deeply suspicious and opened Jay's phone. I was shocked at what I found. He was involved with as many as 20 relationships, and I suspect there were many more. They'd been going on since the day we met, and in fact, every older man he followed on Instagram was in some form of sexual relationship with him. He also had a secret, a second Instagram account to follow the more obvious and salacious accounts that people sometimes have. He was seeing straight men cheating on their wives, gay men cheating on their husbands, was part of no less than 5 thruples where he serviced one or both men, men on the streets and men at the gym. He had lied for years about seeing his family in Florida when in fact he was having sexual rendezvous with married fathers who flew from points as far as Dallas for the weekend. I also found he had used my home in the Hamptons to film himself masturbating and showering and shared those with his lovers. Before I opened the phone, he had been in Boston, where one of the men lived. He's a psychiatrist, oddly enough, and had that guy attend a sporting event he was playing at. He created a close friends group that excluded me and posted all the sweatier, sexy shots to great applause from these men. He then sent me his lover's pictures by text message to get my reaction, which he simply said was a photographer's work. Okay. Wow. I want to take a pause here because there's a lot you've just given me in one paragraph. And unfortunately, I have actually heard this story similarly told by a close friend of mine. And I just want to say, I am so, so sorry that you've gone through this, David. This is betrayal to the nines. Like, I mean, this is really fucked up on so many levels. And I am so sorry that you've gone through this. I wish I could say that this was just a case that you were very unlucky. Unfortunately, I have heard of this happen. Like I said, even with a close friend of mine who's also gay. And it's just so messed up when this shit happens. Okay, so let me just criticize Jay very harshly with appropriate, I think, psychotherapeutic descriptors to describe what's going on. The guy's definitely a sex addict, 100% a sex addict, and also huge liar. He obviously isn't someone who's honest at all. He's certainly not respectful. He may have, feelings for you, but the fact of the matter is that this man, who's only in his, what, from the sounds of it, in his 30s, obviously has such unscrupulous morals and values. Like, this is just so bad. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if you felt like he was a psychopath or a narcissist off the back of this, of which I'm not saying he is, but I am going to say this sort of, if you will, I'm using this term not clinically accurately, but just loosely, this sort of bipolar behavior, if you will, is really, really freaky to be on the receiving end. And I'm so sorry because you spent 7 years with this guy trying to obviously get him comfortable with the idea that, dating an older man might be okay, when clearly to me, that wasn't the issue. The issue to me, from what I'm seeing, is this man has serious intimacy problems. He obviously has a lot of shame. And the fact that and I wouldn't be surprised if he has tremendous trauma. I suspect there's probably something that's happened in the past where he's had some pretty adverse experiences with older men, maybe a distant father. I wouldn't be surprised. Trigger warning. I'm about to talk about sexual assault. I wouldn't be surprised if Jay is actually an SA survivor, because this sort of stuff is something that we can see in some people with a lot of toxic shame who end up, needing to feel a sense of control sexually over other people. And the way that this is playing out suggests to me that this is someone who's really trying very hard to assert a level of control over a perceived threat. Even though I imagine the threat has well and truly gone a long time ago, his nervous system still remembers it. But let's talk about some of these dalliances he's had. So Jay's got a second Instagram account. That's already bad enough. But the fact that he's had over 20 relationships with guys just makes me think, how much pain is this man in? How much external validation does this guy need to satisfy himself? Because I could only imagine being him would be almost as excruciating as living with him in a relationship, because it really seems like he's compartmentalized so much of his life into these distinctive relationships. And you've called them relationships. They're not just flings from the sounds of it. They're full on, relationships. So I don't know how romantic they are or how intense or intimate they are, but, for him to have given parts of himself, like Voldemort's Horcruxes, to all these different people, he must be just like, a shell of a man where he gives only like little bits of himself to other people and he has so much crap going on. This is disgusting. Again, I'm sorry that he has turned into someone like this, but you're the person who's on the receiving end of this shit fuckery. And I'm really sorry that you've had to have this happen to you, David, because this is not okay. This sort of reminds me of a really good book that I read on sex addiction in gay men called Cruise Control. And I really feel like there is an element of cruising here to Jay, meaning that I feel like he's the kind of guy where probably when he's not feeling particularly good about himself, which usually is a trigger that can be the basis for cruising, which is a term used to describe when someone will basically go out looking for sex to feel better about themselves. I wouldn't be surprised if Jay has actually had more than just these 20 relationships. I wouldn't be surprised because you talk about how, he's had sex with men in the streets, men at the gym, he's serviced thruples. This is a man who obviously self-soothes through sex. So this is a man who obviously has deep, 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 deep shame wounds. And also, it seems like there are no boundaries with any of this stuff. Also, can I just say, now this is a personal thing. If any of you disagree, that's perfectly fine. But the minute I hear he was seeing straight husbands where these men who are in straight relationships would go out and see him, to me, when I hear that, my brain goes, well, these men were not straight. Because you can't just, like, if you're in a monogamous relationship with a wife and you're happy and you're genuinely straight and you're not even remotely bi-curious, even if you're on our beautiful spectrum of sexuality, you wouldn't do that. Like, to me, I think this speaks so much to him and his choice of partners, which is, I think Jay, like I said, is compartmentalizing so much of his life So what a surprise that he's also meeting a lot of people who compartmentalize their sexuality as well too. And I don't know if that's also something for you to think about, David. Do you also have a history of trying to like suppress yourself in order to fit in with other people as well too? Because we know that for a lot of gay men, we have often had to try and push ourselves into a heteronormative box in order to fit in and to feel safe and secure. And I think that does take a huge toll on us and can also impact our partner selection as well too, where we often may, you know, be worried about how we come across, and we're very, selective of our partners who we choose, because we may choose more straight acting gay men, men who don't necessarily make us feel like we're about to be shamed by society at large. Something to think about. May not apply to you. But back to Jay, I definitely think that, with the secrets comes also very secretive partners, because it seems like, he's dating a lot of men who are also carrying a lot of secrets in their lives as well too. So I think secrecy is a huge thing that's going on here. And it makes me think, I don't think Jay's particularly happy about his sexuality as well too, because it seems to me like a lot of this stuff is clandestine, very much in the closet, if you will. And I just don't think that he's someone who's comfortable being gay at all if he's doing any of this stuff. Some people might be confused what I mean by that. So there's a lot of gay men, lesbian women, bisexual people, and even people, broadly speaking, who might also associate with different sexualities as part of the LGBTQIA plus community, who know they are attracted to people in a not heteronormative way, but still have a lot of internalized shame about who they are and how they show up. And I think that we often look back at the LGBT community as a whole and think, oh, it's the flamboyance, the drag queens, the butch lesbians, the otters, the bears, all the little micro labels of these communities, right? When a lot of that can actually be a hyper representation of what appears satisfying and safe, a trauma response to not feeling like they can actually just be themselves, enjoy their sexuality without having to perform and to be part of a distinctive label to satisfy society based on past hurt and experiences. So I do think that what I'm sensing with Jay is that he's telling himself, it's okay, we're in an open relationship. But I also find it deeply ironic that he's also craving intimacy and monogamy from you, which suggests to me I'm feeling like there's definitely a disorganized, a fearful attachment with this man. I think he, on one hand, absolutely craves intimacy because he hasn't had any. I think he's probably starving for intimacy. And the way he's treating you now is by not only cheating on you repeatedly, but also giving you crumbs of love. And it's never going to be enough for this guy. This guy has a humongous hole in his love bucket. And, he's explaining that he's not getting enough from you because this man wants so much validation and love. Hence why he's got, 20 plus relationships going on the other side of it too. Like, I got to tell you, I'm so grateful that you've actually given this letter because, you know, like I said, I've got a close friend who went through this and I felt so, shocked and mortified when I heard a story like this happen. And I just think that it's good to talk about these experiences because I think it's very, you know, sometimes I don't think we really appreciate the gravity of how it affects people. And I often find, I've got to be honest, as a gay man, when I work with LGBT clients, I feel like the shit we experience sometimes sounds more exacerbated and more fucked up, frankly, than what our straight counterparts go through, which is not to compare and say, well, if you're straight, you're not going to go through as much pain as us in the LGBT community. It's just to say it's different dimensions of pain. And like I've said in previous episodes, it doesn't matter if each of you have had different amounts of pain. The reality is we're all drowning. Some of us may be at 9 feet, others at 20 feet. It doesn't matter. We're still dying at the end of the day. So the point I want to try and get across is to say that whilst I have seen what I would call more cruel, more intense, exacerbated cases of discards and abandonment from avoidance in the LGBT space, please don't take that to heart and say, oh, well, because in this case, David's gone through something horrific and I didn't, I have to invalidate myself. No, you've gone through pain. Your pain still matters. But David, my God, I'm feeling for you hardcore right now based on what you've been through because this shit is so beyond fucked up. It's so bad. Anyways, David concludes. All this time, I thought he was an avoidant and had read every book out there on attachment theory. I'm not stupid, but he was a master liar and manipulator. Absolutely, he was. I'm still processing everything when he dumped me. I'm heartbroken and dumbfounded at my own stupidity and willingness to accept so little. He said he loved me over and over, and he held me to a remarkably high relationship standard. He led me to believe that if I did enough, I would someday be included in his life. I was deeply sad to see that he had as many as 3 to 4 hookups before coming to my home for one more. Do I feel dumb as fuck? Well, yeah, I do. David, I just want to say I'm so sorry that you've gone through this because I think you were on the money for feeling like this was avoidancy on David's side of the street. Sorry, on Jay's side of the street. However, I think there's so much more to this than just avoidant attachment. I think there's the sex addiction piece. I think this guy's definitely a fearful avoidant for sure. So someone with like severe disorganized attachment. I think that this guy might also have a few other things going on too. I can't tell if he has like a personality disorder based on the information I have here, but this man has got some humongous wounds inside of him. Like the way he's treating you now is likely how he was treated growing up. Betrayed, bereft of connection, feeling like he'll never be enough, never be, able to amount to anything. And I'm not excusing the behavior, don't get me wrong. I'm happy to, burn him alive, if you will, through the message that you're providing. But Jesus, like this is just so bad. And I think that this is someone who probably has a lot of learned helplessness about his case, where he probably feels like, nothing's ever going to get better and he can't just dig himself out of that hole that he's in. So, yeah, he would probably be like an emotional black hole where it just gets worse and worse and worse. I wouldn't even go so far as to say covert narcissist because it just lacks a bit of that nastiness and maliciousness based on what I'm reading. Because usually when I see covert narcissism, I see a lot more other sort of stuff going on, and I'm like, oh, yep, there we are. But still, it's still gross and horrible, like what you've been through. I do genuinely believe, based on what you've said, that, I think he did probably have a lot of positive regard for you. But I also don't like the fact that he's, totally taken advantage of you. Used your home in the Hamptons to have sex. God, I'd feel gross going back to my home if that had happened. I'd want to fucking sterilize it, change all the furniture, and make sure that I also was doing thorough STI tests for myself in case I came down with something. Like, Jesus. You'd want to quarantine yourself off the back of all of this too. And speaking of STIs, this is so bad. Jay's not even thinking about your well-being in that regard. I have infamously used the STI analogy before to describe if you have an avoidant attachment, you need to tell your partner because it's just like having an STI and not disclosing for health reasons. And I'm going to say double whammy for you. He would know what he's doing, right? Like the fact that he's got 20 plus relationships, like this guy is living in cloud cuckoo land of denial about what he can and can't get away with, David. Like, honestly, you've been through the ropes, but I think this really speaks to, a man who's probably had to just survive on denial and delusion with a lot of this stuff. I would say that, one thing that I would say is that whilst you may feel terribly ashamed, terribly embarrassed, and also feel as though, how could you be so stupid for letting this happen? I just want to normalize and say it's very okay to feel this way given what you've just been through. Similarly, my best friend was like this as well too. It took him quite a while to heal off the back of this. And it's just to say that, you've just gone through like pretty intense trauma off the back of this. And it may take you a while to just feel safe in yourself to also choose partners who aren't going to do this to you again. Hell, you may even be writing to me off the back of this saying, oh, I'm never going to pick a partner off the back of that. I don't want to date someone who's in their 30s again. I don't want to date this or that. The issue is not that this guy's in his 30s. The issue is that this guy has tremendous wounds that haven't been addressed. And I think that where I'd be, if you were my client, where I'd be like sitting with you and being like, okay, what is it that you liked about Jay? For you, what is it that, how did you feel when you were dating this guy? Like, what did it bring up for you? Did it make you feel like you weren't enough, that you had to try and earn love from this guy? Because that's a common theme that we see a lot in these cases. And that's a theme that might relate to some wounds of your own that might need to be unpacked in their own time. But, you know, it seems like you were living in a fog. And again, have you been in situations before where you too have had your reality questioned and denied? You know, you seem like someone who is very affluent and successful in terms of your professional life. Do you maybe have experiences where you've constantly had to feel like, I need to strive to show that I'm good enough, that I'm worthy? Many gay men, I will speak for myself, have definitely got the perfectionism, trait where we try and prove ourselves because we've had to feel like, there's something wrong with us for being gay and not also being straight, where we have to try and, have the millions of followers, the millions of dollars. We have to, have the title, and it becomes a bit of an ego experience where we're really desperately trying to prove ourselves to feel like we can fit in and get love because we never felt like we could have acceptance and love from other people. It's very documented stuff, and I definitely resonate with it too. Like, you can read books like The Velvet Rage and even Straitjacket to read some of those themes that come up quite a lot for people who are gay. And I'm sure that this is experienced too for a lot of lesbian women as well. So yeah, long story short, David, I'm going to round out here because I can see your letters on the short side, and that's totally fine. But fuck me, I'm so sorry that you've gone through this. I do think, you've now probably got your PhD in abusive behavior and liars and manipulators and cheats and clowns and, freaks, etc. I know some of those words are derogatory, but my point is simply in saying that, you've been through the circus and you got burned hard, and you certainly didn't get your money's worth off the back of this experience. And I'm sorry that you've had this because it's just shocking, shocking what you've been through. But yeah, I do think that whilst there is definitely a disorganized attachment element here, there's a lot of other stuff going on here too. And in such a small letter, I can't really ascertain more about the nature of this guy. I would be remiss to say it's a personality disorder exclusively because I think there's other stuff too. But this man, oh, Jay's got so much. He would need like a city, not a village, a city to sort of work through his stuff. In any case, thank you very much for sharing all this with me. I hope that this has been validating to you off the back of what you've been through because, mind blown. Any case, for those of you that are interested in submitting a letter, just to let you know, as a reminder, that letter submissions will be opening again in about mid-January when I'm back to work, probably about the 15th of Jan. I'm also going to move the letter submission to an earlier time in the day here in Australia. So that way, those of you that are in Europe, UK, can submit a letter without waking up till like 3 a.m. to submit, because I thought, yeah, you guys definitely deserve to like put your thing in. So that's something that I'll consider as well. I've got one more letter that I'm reading tomorrow with my colleague Laura. And if any of you are interested in getting support for what you're working through, I'm still booked out and I'm also away over the next 3 weeks on holidays. If you need urgent support, please feel free to reach out to my teammates during the holiday period, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. We don't do crisis counseling, so please don't come to us if you're in a state of suicidal ideation or psychosis. Please speak to your crisis team if you need it. But we are obviously happy to help you out with relational stuff to the best of our capabilities. And other than that, if you found this episode of value, please feel free to review it because it does help me out and also to show that we're obviously doing the right thing in supporting new people. But other than that, thank you again, David, for submitting this, because this touched me personally based on experiences that I've heard secondhand from people who've been through this shit, because it's disgusting behavior and it does need to be called out. And I look forward to seeing everyone for the final letter of the year tomorrow.